On June 16th, Commissioners Arthur Babbitts and Letty Moretti both reacted to Sheriff Matt English's appearance with longtime employee Chelo Ramirez, who's losing her job due to funding cuts. Here's what they said about English's statement and his lack of participation in county budget meetings.
I think what we saw today was a lack of leadership, and it was not by Allison who was being attacked, but it was by the sheriff. And I want to have the record very clear that Sheriff English did not attend one single budget committee meeting. He's not here now. I have not spoken with him probably in 3 years. And instead he chose to basically attack us through a proxy. And I think that the way that our administrator, who was doing her job at our direction, was attacked was unfortunate and unreasonable. And I am sorry that that happened, Allison. And I think that the public needs to know and understand the nature of this. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Arthur. I think that's, I've just been thinking about that, and I heard two completely different stories. One that we had public testimony, Sheriff Matt English saying that we had budget cuts from the state, got low numbers in parole probation, and then Mr. Ramirez stating that we had meetings behind closed doors, and just really disappointed and sad that somebody has been misled for the true reasons why they have lost their job. And that doesn't help the situation, right? It's always terrible when somebody loses their job and when they're misled and misinformed and then direct their anger at someone who shouldn't have. I'm so sorry that that happened. It's maddening. It's really disappointing. And you said it correctly. It's a lack of leadership. He runs the sheriff's department, and you're right, he did not attend our meetings.
Let's hear what led to this reaction from Commissioners Babbitts and Moretti. We'll hear Matt English talking about various cuts, and then a very emotional statement from Ms. Ramirez.
So, Commissioners, as you know, in the budget, and I was able to talk to a few of you, there are some proposed cuts in our parole and probation division. This year, there was a general fund ask, which hadn't happened before, of about $150,000. There was a proposed cut to cut our work crew program, which is pretty detrimental to this county. It was a program that existed for 30 years in this county. And so that, had a person in it, has a person in it, which we will lose on July 1st. And then in the last week and a half, the state has $61 million shortfall in parole and probation. And so our take of that pie, which is now smaller than we anticipated, and coupled with the numbers and parole and probation going down, we weren't seeing the cases coming to our office to supervise. Our office is now down to 76 total cases, and 27 of those are ones that have to be supervised. And unfortunately, because of that lower caseload, the loss of revenue, and the fact that we're not getting any general fund investment outside of the grant and aid, it left us with another cut. And so, the work crew supervisor is about a 5-year employee, but because of the CBA that dictates our parole and probation deputies, Ms. Ramirez is here tonight to talk about the impact on her. Ms. Ramirez has been a 20-year employee of Hood River County, and has worked for the parole and probation division since 2005. And because of the way the CBA is written, she was provided a layoff notice by us last week because it's her position that is going away. So effectively, we have a $261,000 shortfall in parole and probation between due to the lack of funding and lack of cases.
Thank you. Ms. Ramirez, would you like to address us?
I do. Allison, I want you to put a face to the number. The number that you felt you could not fund, the number that you felt I was completely just at a cut and you did not care. You did not care that I have worked for 20 years with the same office, that I am the only bilingual person in that office, that I supervise sex offenders, that will now probably be a community risk because now you've made it a point to cut that service. If the public who are victims of crime expects some sort of help, they're not going to get it. It is impossible for one employee to do all that work. One employee that does not speak the language to talk to half of that population. And so I'm the one that has to take the burden of that and explain to my children when I can't purchase basic necessities. But here I am, and I hope you are happy with that decision, Allison and commissioners. My understanding is you guys had multiple closed door meetings and multiple things were offered and you guys did not care. So when community members are at risk because sex offenders aren't being supervised, because people aren't being spoken to in their language, that you take that to bed at night. And I hope you have one sleepless night compared to the multiple that I've had. And at the end of the day, you're not going to care. You're over there making smirks. It's not impact for you, right? Because you're going to pay your mortgage. You're going to feed your kids. You're going to do everything you need to. Same with the rest of you. Shame on you guys from cutting from public safety. Shame on all of you. This is a small community that has big city problems. Yet, when there was an offer, when there was a suggestion to cut from other departments, you were adamant to cut from the sheriff's office. I'm not sure why you're being so vindictive with the people that are going to keep this community safe. It blows my mind that positions are still being filled, that they're still pushed to hire, yet you're letting me go when I've been nothing but a faithful employee to this county. You guys did not care. Your closed agenda meetings, whatever those look like. So the state or the county is going to continue to force people on community service. And yet what are you going to offer them? Nothing. So when you see more crimes happening and zero responsibilities or zero efforts, I hope you guys are very, very proud of yourselves. I am a strong woman. This is a hiccup. I will get by. I don't know what that's going to look like. My oldest told me that he was very proud of me and that he knows I'm going to be okay.
Thank you very much. But I want to thank you for coming and speaking with us. And it was really hard to do. And I appreciate that. I really do.
In going on to discuss the accusations from Ms. Ramirez and Sheriff English, the commissioners, and particularly Commissioner Babbitts, talked about issues relating to the county's budget and financing. County Administrator Allison Williams also provided context. First rebuttal was to remind everyone that there were no closed-door budget meetings. All were open, all were available for public comment.
It was all one meeting over multiple days. We had the public comment available at all the meetings.
Well, I regret that the perception is out there that we had closed door. I'm not quite sure where that came from. So thank you for clarifying that.
This county has always been very lean, and which every department had felt in this year, the added increase of our PERS liability that occurred. I had a discussion with our leadership team to say that as we approach the budget, we are entering into leaner times. And so the board held asked for a special meeting to talk strategy on April 8th. That was an additional public meeting that was put into place. And at that meeting, we talked about the ongoing need to balance the overall cost of county operations and statutory responsibilities, as well as balancing the cost of public safety and the cost of our PERS increases, as well as the continued inflationary pressures post 2020. In approaching the budget, I had over 15 new personnel requests, and only 6.5 were funded and 3.5 of those were funded by grant resources. We have a county budget where we have some serious deficiencies moving forward in the need to replace aging facilities, and we have not planned for those capital improvements. And when you look at the fact that over 58% of our general fund expense is personnel, and we know that the ongoing liability with regard to PERS, and the fact that we have property taxes that are capped at 3% growth, and yet we've had year-over-year personnel expenditure increases countywide of 13%. That differential in terms of what is happening with our budget is not sustainable. And it was the direction of the budget committee and board to make sure that we were providing a budget that was sustainable moving forward. And so at their last meeting, which came at the end of the process, which you were all a part of, I was asked to look for an additional 500,000 in savings. You'll see by the proposed budget, there are 200,000 of those in there, meaning that as we are faced with additional notifications from funders of county grants, that those grants are getting reeled back, we will have to make the rest of those cuts over the coming years.
The issue for years with the county has been achieving sustainability. A decade ago, the county was spending down its reserves regularly on an annual basis and avoiding the tough decisions of actually doing sustainable budgeting. We reached a point where it could not continue any further because the reserves were about to be gone and decisions had to be made. And that's when the public safety levy came forward, and that created you can't call it a sustainable budget when it's based on 5-year levies, but you can call it a semi-sustainable budget. At the same time as the public safety levy, the operating levy was put in place, there were two other major things that happened. There was the ARPA funding and there were COVID grants. So there was a massive influx of cash in different ways, which made budgeting very confusing. So we've always known that when the COVID grants ended, when the ARPA funding grants ended, and when we hit dividing lines between operating levies, that we would have we were heading towards a cliff with the COVID grants ending and the ARPA funds ending. And we always knew that we would have difficulties in figuring out how bad is that cliff and what actions do we take to maintain sustainable budgeting beyond that. So we're at that point now. The next year's budget, this is the last year's budget that has any of those COVID monies or ARPA monies inside of it. And those monies will be entirely gone by next year's budget. And the discussion we had at the budget committee was, how are we going to be sure that we transition into budgets that simply don't have those available funds? And the goal is to avoid having to have major layoffs in next year's budget. We looked at the PERS increase. PERS increase was 8 to 9% of payroll. It was driven by bad market returns. It was also driven very much by higher payroll, especially in law enforcement. We felt that it was important to pay people fair wages rather than repeatedly and continually asking people to work harder. And the sheriff identified for us that retention was a serious issue. And so we've addressed the payroll issues. Largely, we've had successful negotiations with the unions. It was a long process and it was a rather expensive process, but we went through that process. But the result of that is that payroll overall for the county is significantly higher than it was when we started with the first levy. So go back to 5+ years ago, the overall payroll is considerably higher, especially in law enforcement. And so a lot of the increase in PERS was coming out of the law enforcement budget, and we all knew this, and there's no magic here. The unfunded actuarial liability, which Allison mentioned, climbed from 7.5 million to 15 million in the last biennium. As a percent of payroll, it goes from 86% of payroll to 152% of payroll. That is an unsustainable. Our resources generally grow at about a 3 to 4.5% rate. So we look back at the budgets and how sustainable have the budgets been over the last couple of years. And if you look back at 23-24, in 23-24, we budgeted to spend down our balances by 8.4 million. In other words, our budget was that unsustainable in the form that we passed it in. And so the question is, why did we even pass a budget that was planning to spend down our reserves by 8.4 million? That's because we knew that we had this confusion with all of these COVID and ARPA monies in this process. And we knew that our staff was going to be capable of managing the budget so that the actuals at the end of the year would be in the black instead of in the red. And in fact, instead of spending down our reserves by 8.4 million, we were able to see 3.7 million in the black in resources in that year. So it's a $12 million difference between what the budget said and what we were able to actually achieve. What our finance staff has told us is that is not going to be the case this year, that we are now budgeting far more leanly. We simply cannot expect results like that. And yet we still have a situation where we have $4 million in expenses over revenue. Could have made things work this year with a promise that they're not going to work next year. And what staff has done instead is provide us with an option that we think has a strong possibility of allowing us to go from this year's budget into next year's budget without having to do major layoffs in next year. One person losing their job is a terrible thing. The reality is if we don't take action this year, then it's going to be far worse next year. I am not comfortable even with the budget as presented here, and we discussed this in the budget committee meetings. But I think we need to take some stronger actions where we put some spending controls in place. And specifically, number one is that I believe that all hirings that happen in this fiscal year need to face an additional budgetary review at the Board of Commissioners. In other words, put a hiring freeze and do something similar on the capital side. I believe that we can pass this budget, but we all recognize that this $4 million gap that's in this budget is not going to be something that staff will easily be able to address during this fiscal year. And so we need to add additional tools to do that. And I believe that a hiring freeze with BOC review is one step. And I'd also like to take a step on the capital side.
All right. I hear you. We will do that.
I had a few things. Yeah. So I think it's important that folks understand this has become an issue where we've brought up or what's been brought up is how we address the public safety levy. And so every dollar of the levy goes into law enforcement budget. For every dollar that the levy puts into the law enforcement budget, an additional 61 cents from the general fund gets put into law enforcement. Since 2022-2023 budget, that number has doubled. So in other words, the amount of general fund funds that have had to go in addition to the levy into the law enforcement budget has doubled in the last 3 years. The subject has been raised that additional needs for law enforcement should be coming out of the general fund. And built into that is the presumption that the operating levy is a blank check to draw upon the general fund for any additional needs that happen on the law enforcement side of the budget. And I just don't see how that is a conceivable or reasonable way of interpreting a budget. And I think that it's important to bring that out and say that, because I think we have to have these sorts of discussions in the open. I wish that there were funds available to fund everything that we could want. Reality is, in the last 8-10 years, at least, the law enforcement side of the ledger has been kept far more whole than the rest of the county operations. We're responsible for a broad set of operations. We can't make decisions with our emotion. We have to make decisions with our brains as to how to keep the county functioning. If the largest set of payroll, the largest set of expenses in our county budget has the ability to draw whatever it needs off of the rest of the functions, the budget simply doesn't work. It's not, mathematically, it's not possible to achieve that. For years, the commission sort of danced around it by drawing money out of timber funds and all sorts of things, and now those funds are empty. And we haven't accomplished the things that those funds are supposed to be accomplishing. I think that we are making rational and reasonable decisions.
Most people ignore public meetings about the budget because they seem boring. But thanks to the commissioners, county finance employees, and the volunteers in the budget committee, we have a budget for 2025-2026. Like the rest of us, Sheriff English did not participate in any of the public budget committee hearings this year. Maybe next year, he and the rest of us will take a more active role.